Hello and welcome to God I Hear You. I'm your host, Renee, and today's title is God Will Equip You. And we're going to highlight the word equip. Today, I'm going to start with a Bible verse. I'll be reading out of the New International Version from the book of Hebrews, chapter 13, verses 20 through 21. And it states, "Now may the God of peace, who through the blood of the eternal covenant brought back from the dead our Lord Jesus, that great shepherd of the sheep, equipped you with everything good for doing his will. And may he work in us what is pleasing to him through Jesus Christ, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen." So I will consider this episode a sequel to episode 1. So if you haven't watched Accepting the Call, I highly recommend you go back after watching this, or maybe put this one on pause and watch Accepting the Call. It's so crazy that when I recorded Accepting the Call, which was my first episode, I had so many mixed emotions. I sat on the couch and I was like, oh my, I forgot to say this, that, this, that, this, that. And I was like in my head and trying to figure out, should I re record and add those things in that I forgot? And I just had this piece that, Renee, what you had was enough. And at this point, I didn't want you to add those things. So I took that and I said, okay, I'm going to let it be. So in this episode, I'm really going to highlight how every time I created a problem, God created a solution and he equipped me on my journey. I know in the first episode, I really highlighted the confirmations I received. But this one, I really, really want to get into the nitty gritty of how he equipped me on my journey. So we're going to talk in depth about the move, the podcast, and the community. So to rewind back to October of 2023, at this point, I just got my job offer from the recruiter. And if you're like me, you start to think of every single problem and how you're going to get the job done. So I literally gave my current employment at that time 3 weeks notice. And I really wanted to give them more, but I really had to get this done because I was like, if I wait a couple more weeks, then we're going to be in the mid of December. And I really did not want to move when it was super, super cold. So I gave them 3 weeks. And my last day at that organization was November 1st. And my start date for this new job was November 15th. So you could already see that I had a short window. And with having a short window, that's just added pressure. So at this point, I'm like, okay, there's so many things I need to get done. I need to lock up all the items that I have at my current job. I have to find an apartment. I have to pack, move my stuff halfway across the US, all within literally like 2 weeks. So as you can see, I'm starting to create so many problems. And with how I was feeling peace, but I was also wondering, how am I going to get all this done in this short window? And so it's so interesting that with the apartment, I wouldn't have had any time to fly here and do some like apartment searching or anything like that. So I was really looking at virtual tours. But as you know, Chicago does have some sort of a reputation. So you have to be really mindful of what area you're living in, etc. So I'm doing this apartment search. I'm looking at all these places online. And there's this one place, which I'm currently in now, that was really sticking out to me. And I was like, you know what? I think I want to go with that one. And it was the only one that made sense. It was super close to my job. It takes me 12 minutes to get to work. And it's a great location. So I still had some questions, and I just happened to be talking to the recruiter who was just following up with me about some open items that I needed to complete for my employment. And he was just like, out of curiosity, like, what area are you thinking of moving to? So I told him, not thinking anything of it. Do you know this man really went all the way to this apartment to check it out for me? And I'm like, okay. He calls me. He's like, oh, just by the way, I just wanted to let you know that I went over there. Everything looks good. It's an up and coming area, yada, yada, yada. And I was just like, wow, he did not have to do that. Like, he went above and beyond. So, okay, one, you see that problem was instantly solved. So I ended up going forward with that place. Everything was locked away. But then I'm like, okay, I still have a gang of problems here. I'm thinking of the move, packing my stuff up. And when I tell you, if there's one person that hates packing, that is me. I hate moving. I hate everything about it. It's so much pressure. You always feel like you're going to forget stuff. It's just a lot. And so again, I'm starting to feel a little stressed out, like how I'm going to get this done. And I just happened to like start texting people like, hey, y'all, I know I didn't tell nobody that I was interviewing, but by the way, I'm moving to Chicago in 2 weeks. And as I'm sending those messages out, I text my two brothers, not my blood brothers, but they're my blood brothers, if that makes any sense, Marco and Z. And I'm like, hey, y'all, I got some news. I'm moving. And I literally did not even have to ask. I did not have to ask. Marco goes, oh, well, me and Z gonna move your stuff. And I was like, wait a minute. Y'all gonna get in the truck and drive my stuff down here? And they're like, yeah, no problem. Like, we'll do it. And I'm like, oh my, oh my. Like, that was such a huge hurdle that I put in my head of, what am I going to do? I'm going to get a truck, then have my car tagged on the back. Like, what am I going to do? It was so stressful. And again, God placed it on their heart to do that for me. That's favor. That's equipping me on my journey. So we have two major problems already knocked out. And at this point, obviously, I'm feeling blessed. But me being me, I'm going to think of what's next. What is the next issue? What is the next thing that I have to solve? And so another big issue was, okay, that's one thing. My parents are a little bit older. So helping me pack and move, because I had some really, really heavy furniture, that was going to be an issue. And so I put it in my text, like we have like this family group chat. Everybody started volunteering. So my cousins came, they packed up my stuff, and I was just good. And again, that just goes to show you how much God will equip you on your journey. Like every single thing that I created as a problem, He legit had a solution, and the solution came immediately. And I just felt like it was like a seamless move. Everything was just working out the way it was supposed to work out. Everything. So that's just one side of things. But when I actually got here in Chicago, I talked about it a lot in Accepting the Call. I just got, confirmation after confirmation. But separate to that, the podcast was really weighing on my mind. And when God is calling you to do something, it's human of us to question, okay, well, what's the title going to be? What's the content? How am I going to be talking? Am I going to have guests? And I just started thinking of a whole bunch of problems. Like, do I have to rent out a studio? That's another bill. I'm thinking of every single thing as a problem. And God just continued to work on showing me how much He will show up for me. So just to start, I really was sitting there like, okay, what is this title going to be? Because I know you want me to do this at this point. The thought is not going away. The feeling is not going away. And one night, I just went to sleep and I woke up. And as soon as I woke up, it was like, God, I hear you. And I'm like, wait a minute. That sounds like it's supposed to be the title. It's like, it was so heavy. it felt so light, if that makes any sense. It was heavy in my mind, but I knew that that was the way to go. And so I said, okay, cool. That has a ring to it. I like it. I'm sold. So I wrote it down. And I noticed that every time I scratched the surface and completed a task or accepted a task, the next task presented itself. So I got the title now. And so, of course, me being me, I'm thinking of all the different problems. Okay, well, what am I going to be talking about? What are the topics? How frequent am I going to be doing the podcast? Is it going to be weekly? Because in my head, I'm like, oh, Lord, that is stressful. Is it going to be bi-weekly? And literally, God just started speaking to me. So another night, went to sleep, and it was like a 2-for-2 special. I got up and it was just like bi-weekly. That's what I want you to do. I want you to do it bi-weekly. And I want you to just write down the topics that come to your mind, but think of the alphabet. And when I first got that thought, I was like, think of the alphabet. That's interesting. Why am I thinking of the alphabet? And literally, I realized that as the topics kept coming in, it was in alphabetical order. And so you see, accept in the call, be bold, courage, debilitating doubt. He will equip you. And, I was like, okay, wow, everything's coming. And I just started, writing the topics down. And then I realized, God told me bi-weekly, which means that's every other week. We know there's 52 weeks in a year. So bi-weekly would mean 26. When you look at the alphabet has 26 letters. So that is so huge. I was just like, wow, you literally told me the frequency and gave me the tool I needed, which was the alphabet, to just focus on that. And the topics just started pouring in. And it's so crazy that there's no coincidence that there's 26 is the amount of weeks, because it's bi-weekly, and 26 is the amount of letters in the alphabet. That's God. So again, a problem I created, He provided the solution. He equipped me with what I needed. And so now we're like, okay, I have the title of the podcast. I'm starting to get some topics. But let's talk about logistics. I don't have a podcast studio. I'm not a sound engineer. I don't have those sort of things. So that's where my mind went. I just started thinking of all the problems and no solutions. So I ended up calling my brother, and I'm like, Kyle, I feel like if God wants me to do something, it shouldn't be like, I probably am going to have to spend some money. But I feel like I just need to start it. And if I start it, I can start small and I can grow, So I was, taking that positive approach of, I don't have to have everything figured out. I don't have to have a podcast studio, etc. So at this point, I'm like, okay, I'll use my laptop. I'll probably need some sort of a mic, and I could just go from there. And so as I'm talking to my brother, he has a musical background with sound record, etc. He was just like, why don't you call Musician Friend? So Musician Friend is a musical, I would say, manufacturing company that sells mic stands, cameras, everything you would need to have a studio. He said, why don't you call them, talk to one of the reps, see, what they say you should get for recording and a mic, because I'm not too familiar with what sort of a mic would be best. So I was like, okay, cool. So I'm like, okay, let me call them. So I call and I get a representative on the phone, and I was like, hey, I'm looking for some information on, mics for podcasts. And he was like, let me just ask you some clarifying questions. He was like, are you going to be the sole person talking? What is the kind of structure you're looking for? And also, if you don't mind me asking, what's the topic? Like, what is it going to be about? What's the title if you don't mind sharing? So I said to him, I was like, my podcast is entitled God, I Hear You. I'm going to be doing it by myself. Eventually, I do want to grow and, have, guests, etc. And I'm just really going to be talking about, my relationship with God and encouraging others to develop that relationship with God or strengthen their relationship with God, and just be the best version of themselves. So he goes, I don't want to sound crazy, but there's literally, it's literally God why you're calling. And I was a person that picked up the phone. He was like, I have a podcast with my church. And I'm like, no way, no way. He's like, yes, I have a podcast with my church. And he was like, it's kind of on pause right now, but just so you know, I am so excited for you. And I'm going to tell you a lot of stuff that you need. So I was like, okay, cool. So he's telling me, you need to get this mic. This is the mic that, a lot of the podcast individuals are using. If you use your MacBook, he even told me the software to use. I would have never even known that. He told me about the OBS Studio software. He was like, if you watch some videos on YouTube, it will be, kind of easier to navigate. It's a bit challenging, but once you, kind of get comfortable, everything will work out. So I'm writing this stuff down. Now, let's pause on that. Literally called, and the person I'm speaking to has a podcast, a spiritual podcast, and is willing to help me get me started. That's God equipping me on my journey. So we ended up getting off the phone, and I am hyped at this point. I'm like, yep, I'm in it. God got me. You can't tell me nothing. You can't tell me not a thing, right? So I pull up my good old MacBook, and I'm like, we're going to crank this thing open, wipe the dust off, and get started. So literally, I download the studio that he told me to download, and my MacBook said, not today, honey. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? So I'm like, why is my MacBook acting so weird? Granted, it's old. I had it from undergrad, but still, I'm like, So I ended up getting a phone call from my family in Detroit. And they were like, hey, Renee, like, we're in Chicago. Come out to eat with us. So forth and so forth. So I was like, okay, cool. I'll do that. So they're on Michigan Ave. So I said, you know what? There's an Apple store on Michigan Ave. Let me just bring my laptop there and see if they can troubleshoot it to see why it's not allowing me to download this, software. So I bring it to dinner. I had a great time with them. Then I walked over to the Apple store. I go to the Apple store, and they pull up my laptop, and they were like, yes, sis, your your laptop is pretty much too old to download anything new on it. And I'm like, dang, like, they're like, yeah, like, they're like, not only it's too old, it's like this, you cannot even download the new software of Apple because it's that old. And I'm like, wow. So I'm like, okay, the only way I'm going to get this podcast started is I got to buy a new laptop. And I'm like, dang, I really didn't want to spend this money on no laptop. And I don't know if y'all recently went into the Mac store, but y'all know these phones cost like $1,000 or more. So can you imagine how the laptops cost now? So I'm looking at the prices, and I'm like, oh, be offense, Lord, be offense, because these prices for the laptops are insane. I mean, insane. So me being me, I'm talking to the guy, and I'm telling him what I need it for, etc. And he was just like, yeah, if with this MacBook, you'll get everything done on it. Like, you wouldn't need anything else. Like, you can engineer stuff yourself. You're using that studio. He was like familiar with, some of the stuff as well. So I was like, dang, I'm joking around, being playful. I'm like, when did Mac start charging these crazy prices for laptops? And he's cracking up. He was like, man, I know, like it's expensive. He was like, but you're a student, right? You're a student. And I'm like, it didn't click. I'm like, nah, I ain't no student. He was like, no, you're a student and we're doing a student discount right now. So I'm like, yes, I'm a student in life. I'm always learning and growing. So we're cracking up. He gives me the student discount. And oh Lord, I was thankful. But again, at this point, I'm just really just had to take a moment and just thank God. Like, look at all the things that happen from the title to the frequency to the topics to me getting on the phone with someone that has a podcast, like ordering mics, just going to the Apple store. Everything that I created as a problem in my mind, God created a solution. He equipped me each and every part of the journey. And so I really wanted to share this side of the story with you all because I wanted to share it in episode 1, but it's like, you know how God works. Sometimes the message is meant to be said at a different time. So, anywho, leaving the Apple store, I felt so blessed. I did everything that I was told in terms of, research, learning how to use the studio. And, I've just been, just trying to follow that journey and follow that call. And, I would say the couple more hurdles came up, couple more problems in my mind of like, okay, now what am I going to do about the logo? And I'm just thinking of, content. I got to do all this stuff. And it's just like, God just really opened up my mind and reminded me that I am a creative person. So everything that you've seen me post in terms of like photos and content fillers, it's really just been me using like Etsy templates and Canva. And with the logo, I ended up using this random app. Again, he will equip you. I saw this app saying logo generator with AI, clicked on it, and everything just was so perfect. And, shout out to my friends too, Alicia and Antori, that really just, helped me take pictures. I went home one weekend and we kind of got everything done in terms of like taking pictures for the podcast. And it's just like, I feel so, 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 so blessed. And so I say all this to say that when God calls you to do something, he will equip you. There is nothing too big for God. And I really want to talk about, because as I like to do, I like to tie in the Bible with my life and, just kind of get y'all interested in reading a bit more and learning for yourself. But I really want to highlight Moses. So outside of Jesus, I will say Moses is probably my favorite person in the Bible. And Moses' story is really highlighted in the book of Exodus. So I really want you guys to read the book of Exodus when you get a chance. And so to give you a summary for those that don't know Moses, Moses was a Hebrew Israelite. He was a child of Israel. And at the time of Moses' life, like when he was, early stages, there was Pharaoh who was the ruler over Egypt. And Pharaoh was awful. He pretty much had the Hebrews, the Israelites, and was oppressing them. And as he saw them growing, he oppressed them even more because he wanted to keep them under his control and under his power and leadership. So this is like slavery, pretty much. That's what it is, slavery. And so the children of Israel, the Hebrews, they are literally oppressed every day. They're waking up, they're working and working and working just to build Pharaoh's kingdom. And so how Moses comes into the picture is Pharaoh sees that although he's oppressing the Hebrews, the Israelites, they're still growing. And so he's becoming fearful that they're going to grow and grow and grow and overpower and overthrow him. So he commands that all the midwives, once someone has a son, he wanted the midwives to actually kill the child. And the midwives, they didn't want to do that. And they were, still allowing people to have sons. They weren't doing what they were told to do. So the next decree from Pharaoh was for them, like when the child was born, they were supposed to throw the son into the Nile River. And so obviously, as a parent, if you have a son that's born, you're literally like, you don't want to do that. You carried that child for all that time. Like nobody wants to do that, right? So Moses' mom, she hid him and up until she could hide him. And when it came to a point where she could no longer hide, because Pharaoh's sending people to, looking in people's homes, he's not playing. He's trying to, make sure that all the male childs are non-existent. So what she does is Moses' mom, she puts him in a basket and she technically obeyed. She did put him in the Nile River. She did put him in there, but she didn't just throw him in there to drown. So she put him carefully in a basket and put him in the Nile River. Of course, God being God, he will make a way out of no way. Pharaoh's daughter sees this basket with this cute baby in it and she falls in love. She's like, nope, I want this baby for myself. And she actually recognized that it was a Hebrew's child. So Moses at this point is a baby. He is now in the kingdom of Pharaoh. He's raised under that sort of leadership, but he knows he's a Hebrew. So at this point, Moses has life good. He's not doing the same work as the other Hebrews. He's in the kingdom of Pharaoh. So as with us, when you know who you are, you still gonna step for who you are. So there was a point where Moses saw a Hebrew being belittled and treated very badly and poorly by one of Pharaoh's, workers. So out of rage, Moses literally kills this Egyptian with his bare hands, right? And because he knew what he'd done and he knew that people witnessed, he ended up going on the run. And so Moses is on the run and Moses pretty much says, okay, he can never go back to Egypt. He is in hiding. He knew Pharaoh was looking for him to come get him. So he was in deep water. So Moses is now on the outskirts and trying to find a way out of nowhere. Moses meets a lady, they get married, and Moses really starts living a life like he never was once in that situation. So at this point, Moses is literally like living like a secret new life. But when God calls you to do something, he going find you and you're hiding. He going to call you out. So there's a moment where Moses is literally like an angel of the Lord appeared to Moses. And I'm going to just read what it says here. So this is in Exodus chapter 3, verses 9 through 12. So it says, "Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, and you will bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Here's what Moses responds to God. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? Here's what God replies. So he said, I will certainly be with you, and this shall be a sign to you that I have sent you. I will certainly be with you. So I want to highlight a couple things, right? God found Moses in his hiding. He had an assignment for Moses. He's calling Moses, and Moses creates the first problem. His first problem is, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? Because Moses knows. He left because he's on the run because he knows Pharaoh's going to kill him. And God is literally telling him, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that problem. I will equip you. I will certainly be with you. So from there, you can already see that when God is calling you to do something, there is nothing that should stand in your way. So we go a little bit further. Moses is not convinced yet. Moses is creating every sort of problem that could potentially be a thing. So he goes and says later on, this is also in chapter 3. Then Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." So the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Or who makes the mute, the deaf, the seeing, or the blind? Have not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with you and your mouth and teach you what you shall say." So now you see Moses. He like, okay, there's so much things here. And he's creating every problem. Now he's saying, I don't even talk that well. How am I going to go to Pharaoh? How am I going to lead the people out? Like, this is too much. He's basically saying, get somebody else to do it, right? So then, verse 13, it says, "But he said, O my Lord, please send by the hand of whoever else you may send." So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is not Aaron the Levite your brother? I know that he can speak well. And look, he is also coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. Now you shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be your mouth and with his mouth, and I will teach you what you shall do. So he shall be your spokesman to the people, and he himself shall be as a mouth for you, and you shall be to him as God." So again, Moses created a problem, and God saying, nothing is big for me. Whatever you just said. And you know what's so funny about this? When I read this and it said that, so the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. It just reminded me of, like, you ever have a friend that they're coming to you with a problem and you're giving them a solution and they still creating a problem. You just like, girl, do you want my help or not? You know? And it's so funny because we're literally made in God's image. And I feel like you can, as you read the Bible, you see the personality. God does have a personality. And you see it more and more. And you're just like, he's kind of funny and fearful in so many ways. But he literally was just saying to Moses, please, just save the theatrics. I got you. How much times I got to tell you I got you? You created so much problems and I gave you a solution every time. So why do you keep going with the problems? And it's so interesting that as we further progress in Exodus, now you guys got to read it. As we further progress in Exodus, you see it happen over and over and over. Moses creates a problem that he feels cannot be solved, and God creates a solution. And so, Moses eventually accepted the call, And he went to Pharaoh. And when he went to Pharaoh and said to Pharaoh, like, his ask was, for the children of Israel to be released. And he said it was for a feast, which was really a decoy for escape, but that's what he said. This is what took place. So let me read it. It says, afterward, Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, thus says the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness. And Pharaoh said, who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, nor will I let Israel go. So now we have a problem. Now, we looking back, we know that, you see that Aaron is Moses' brother. He went with Moses to help with the speaking and, because Moses said that was an issue and God gave him a resource. But now we have a major problem. Pharaoh's just flat out said, I don't care. I'm not doing that. No. So Moses at this point goes back to God and he's like, okay, I did what you said, but he said no. And God literally reminded Moses, nothing is too big for me. If I asked you to do something, I will equip you. So pretty much God told Moses, you go back and you tell him what I said. Let them go. Let them go. Or there's going to be some stuff that happened. Each time Pharaoh said no. And each time the Lord sent Moses back. So Pharaoh kept saying no, and God stood behind Moses and gave them plague after plague after plague. So just to tell you a couple of plagues. So what happened in Egypt was the water became blood. Then there was frogs and lice that swarmed Egypt. Still, Pharaoh saying no. Then Egyptian livestock died. That means the animals are dying. Pharaoh still said no, he wasn't going to let them go. And at this point, Moses is going back to God like, look, nothing you do, this man is still saying no. God's like, nah, keep going. And I'm going to keep stepping behind you. Then there was plagues of boils and hail. Then there was locusts. And there was darkness. And Pharaoh is still saying no. That is one stubborn mule. He said no, 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 no. He's watching his people suffer. He's suffering himself, and he's still saying no. So at this point, I know Moses is like, okay, God, every time I go to this man, he's saying no. And I know you're doing stuff on your end, but it doesn't seem to be shaking him. God said, no, go again. Go again. Now, the last plague was the death of a firstborn. And this was the only thing that then released the children of Israel. Once that happened, Pharaoh did release the children of Israel. And when he released the children of Israel, it's like something came over him and he was like, I need y'all to come back. So he released them, but then went after them. So what you can see here is even after God showed up for, them countless of times, there was still adversity. And that's something that you need to know. God will show up for you and with you, and he will equip you. But sometimes you're still going to have adversity. You're still going to have challenges. That's normal. So don't be defeated by the adversity and the challenges that come, because God is still going to step behind you and for you and with you always. And so I want to read this part to you because I really want you to understand what was going on. So this is what it says, right? This is later on. Now they're released. They're on the run with Moses and Aaron. And we're talking, think about, and it's obviously probably even more people than that. I can't remember if it even said the number, but think about the whole state, Chicago, Connecticut, wherever you listening from, think about your whole state following behind Moses on the run, right? And now you have the Egyptian army that you were released, but now they're coming after you, right? So at this point, they come to a point where they're ahead, but they know that the soldiers are coming to try to get them back. And they come to a point where they're at the Red Sea. This is what happens. It says, "And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. So they were very afraid. And the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, 'Because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt with us to bring us up out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than we go and die in the wilderness.' And Moses responded and said to the people, 'Do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you. The Lord will fight for you. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace.'" Now, as I was reading through this book of Exodus, I will not lie to you. The children of Israel, they got on my last nerve. The last. Every time God showed up for them, they still created a problem after. This is what they're doing here. They done seen that he done created plagues to let them go. But no, they're still saying, you brought us out and now we're going to die in the wilderness. You should have just left us there. We're better off as slaves. This is what they're saying. And I'm thinking, and I'm like, could they be any more ungrateful? They're just ungrateful. And I remember I even called my mom. I'm like, "Mom, I'm reading the book of Exodus, and the children of Israel, they getting on my last one." And she was like, "Girl," basically like, "Yes, girl." When I read it, they was getting on my nerve too. But when we think about it, how are they annoying? I'm just like that. I do the same thing. God shows up for me. He equips me. And I still create a problem after. And I still start thinking in my head, well, if I would have did this, I probably would have. We're no better. We're no better. But we have to do better. So God literally, despite the complaints, despite everything, there's so much in the book of Exodus, he equipped them on their journey. So each and every time, even when they didn't deserve it, even when we don't deserve it, he still shows up. And so I want to say this to you. It's a tactic of the enemy to pour doubt, to pour fear and questions and problems without solutions. You start to overthink and you start to think, okay, if this happens and this will happen, and you start to create so much problems and there's no solutions. That is a tactic of the enemy to stop you from your call, stop you from your purpose, stop you from what God really desires for your life. So when you recognize that, put your problem in God's hands. Let him equip you. Let him create the solution. Stop the overthinking. Stop the doubt. You're wasting your time with all these questions. Know that God will, God can, and God does. He will show up. He will equip you. And there is nothing too big for God. When I mean nothing, pray about everything. Put your life in his hands. There is nothing too big for God. What he's done back then, sometimes we forget. He is still doing it today. He's doing it today in our lives. He'll provide you with community, friends, whatever you need. God has you. There is no problem that is bigger than God. And so I want to leave off by saying this, and it's from Matthew, the book of Matthew, verses 6 through 34. Well, chapter 6, 34. It says, "Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." Whatever is holding you back from your call, remember, every problem, God will have a solution. He will equip you. Well, that's all for today, friends and family. As always, thank you for joining me. If you like it, make sure you like it when you watch it. Share it with someone that you feel, or, just share it. And I'm encouraging you to subscribe as well. All right, peace.